go into survival mode. And when it happened really quickly. We'd grown this from pretty much zero to about 500 million in about 10 years.
How do you see the logistics industry moving in the next 2 to 5 years?
Chicago, New York, LA, just backwards and forwards,
Hollywood lifestyle.
We ended up selling that for like 21 times return. I'd say to people, yeah, this is an industry where you can do it.
Today's guest helped build a global powerhouse. He then sold it, but instead of retiring, he started again. So I'd like to make a big welcome to David Emerson. I'm very privileged to have you on the podcast today. So
nice
thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
If you just start us right at the beginning, how did you get involved with Seco, and how did it progress in those early years?
So it was basically, Seco was already an existing business in the US. It was a domestic logistics company, mainly doing a little bit of international, but mainly domestic, founded by two guys. My partner, Mark, worked with them. He sold his company to a company that bought them, which they then bought back from a management buyout. So he got to know Bill and Steve, the two guys in the States, really well. Their business had been impacted by kind of 9/11 and, domestic screening and all sorts of stuff in the domestic market. So they wanted to go global, but they didn't really know much about the market outside the US. So they asked Mark if he'd be interested. Mark wasn't really that keen at first because he just sold his company and wanted to hang his boots up for a bit, but soon got back involved. And I knew Mark from previous times where we had talked about starting another business about 2 years earlier. And he just called me and said, look, we've got this opportunity. Do you fancy coming in? And it was with him and a guy that worked for Mark at his old company, a guy called Keith O'Brien, and another guy that worked with him called Keith Gaskin. So it was really the four of us. And we started, it's like really small, 7 people, a couple in Manchester, a couple in London, a really, basic setup, just a handful of people, air freight, sea freight, customs clearance, bit of money we all threw in, and that was it.
Yeah, and do you think you would have done it if it wasn't Mark asking you?
I wouldn't. Or
would he have done it, do you think, if you hadn't jumped on board?
I think he would have done it without me. Yeah. Definitely, knowing him as I do. I always wanted to do my own. I always had, because I came from the corporate world of corporate logistics, big companies, and I had a lot of customers that always said, look, if you start on your own, let me know and we'll always support you. But you never know if that's going to transpire or not. So I'd always wanted to do it, but just didn't have the balls to do it on my own, is the truth. Yeah. And then doing it with the guys just made it a much easier decision, especially because, it was literally start off in the UK, but the deal we did with Bill and Steve was that we would take the rest of the world. So they would focus on the US and the Americas, and we would take the rest of the world, which is a pretty big place.
Yeah. And without going into the details of the numbers, at that point, was that a huge commitment for you? Was that sort of putting your mortgage on the line kind of investment then? Or
Totally, yeah. Total life-changing, going from big corporate sort of, salary and perks and nice office with a coffee machine and a PA and all of that kind of stuff, and BA gold card and always sitting up the front and all of this stuff to, not doing any of that and basically working in the nitty-gritty and knocking on doors and pulling in favours and, going back to how it was when I was probably 23, 24 years old. So it was a big commitment financially, and I had a young family then. Yeah. But Mark's very persuasive. And I had a lot of confidence because he had a great track record. And Bill and Steve were great guys, and there was a really good semblance of a plan, and we felt there was a gap in the market. So I don't think we ever looked back. The first year was a bit scary, but then within a year, 18 months, I think we were past the scary bit, and we were starting to feel that we had a bit of wind behind us.
No, because you took my question away a bit there. I was going to ask, how many times did you look back on the decision in those early years and think, maybe I made the wrong one, or it got a bit tight?
In the early years, I was too busy, is the honest truth, to look back. And also in the early years, you're like, well, there's nothing I can do about it now. We just have to sell our way out of it if we have a problem. When you look at it, is actually later on when we sold half of the company in 2015, and we all made some money, and you're like, okay, that's great. But then you look back and go, bloody hell, that could have gone pretty wrong pretty quick.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if you have confidence and you have a good team and people, it is literally, this business is still a people business, and we built a brilliant team.
Yeah. And how did the team form itself? So when you sat down with Mark and Keith and the rest, did you agree roles and responsibilities, the sort of typical things you do, or did you just jumped in?
Yeah, no, high level, it was always me and Keith Gaskin on business development and sales in the early days, me in the south, Keith in the north, because he was in Manchester, I was in London. And then Keith O was always going to be kind of in operations and execution, and Mark was more strategy and being the link with the US guys and making sure that what we were doing was aligned. It was definitely different because they were US domestic and we were international air freight, sea freight, road freight, customs brokerage, of which they only did a little bit of that. Their main business was domestic trucking and domestic air freight. But Mark did that and the more strategic stuff, but he also got involved in new business with me. But when you're at that level, the customers that you could talk to when I was at Eagle and Expeditors, they didn't talk to us. They talked to us and they let us take them out for lunch and have a coffee and stuff, but they had no intention of giving us any work. Because we were just too small. So we had to kind of find our own way.
Yeah. So can you explain then how it started from zero, from at least the rest of the world stuff? Or let's say the first half of the business, first 10 years maybe of the business. You mentioned, I think, previously that Manchester, London were the first two.
Yeah, Manchester and London were the
stuff.
first two. And then obviously as we were growing, London and Manchester to like, I don't know, 20, 30 people. Then it got to 30, 40 people and the revenue got to like 30, 40 million quid. As we were doing that, the US company was finding its feet a bit internationally and a bit globally. So they were growing as well. And then we had, I think it was 2005, Bob van der Putten, who worked with me at Eagle, we got him to open Holland, which turned out to be just a blinding decision because Bob was amazing and built a fantastic business in Seco Holland, which still today is a really big business. And then I think we did Germany, which was a challenge because Germany's hard. It's a hard business, hard country to make money in freight forwarding. It's lots of really well-established players and high salaries, high costs, hard to get customers. So we did all right in Germany, but we never did fabulously. And then I think the next country we did after that in 08, I think 07 was South Africa. And it was always people-led. So, when I was at Expeditors in the very early days, when Expeditors was a small company, they opened offices where they found a really good team. It didn't matter about what the country was. It was where they found a really good team. They built the sort of the country around them, and we did similar. So we did South Africa because we had some guys that were really good that we knew that used to work with me at Expeditors that wanted to come out and do it themselves. And then the big one after that was Hong Kong and China. So we kind of most of our business was from Asia. It was air freight and sea freight from Hong Kong, China. We had a brilliant agent there, but we always wanted to do it ourselves. So I think 08, Keith O'Brien went to Hong Kong and opened, I think it was 5 or 6, maybe 7 or 8 offices literally on the same day, like 4-man offices, 5-man offices, but literally we turned the lights on and took over from the agent, because in freight forwarding you can't just do it piecemeal. It's feast or famine really. So we did that, and that was a really big success. And then that really took off, and that gave us the knowledge that the network was king. That if you had Seco at one end and Seco at the other end, it was a pretty good thing. And in those days, we were servicing customers that wouldn't normally get serviced as well by the big guys. So our niche was not SMEs, but companies that would spend $300,000 to $1 million, if you like, in freight costs with us, which for us was a lot of money. But for the big guys, they didn't care about customers at that size. So we really focused on building great technology, which was Mark's passion. So we built all our own tech, all our own added value stuff that, again, the customers wouldn't get unless they were getting it from a really big global company. But to get it, they would have had to spend big money. So we had guys that were spending $1 million, but were getting the tech that they shouldn't really be getting. And that was the start of the journey, really, because we realised that was the glue that kept people. As long as you did a great job and great service, the tech made a big difference.
Yeah, and you skipped over something which a lot of builders and founders generally do, and that was, well, we got to 30, 40 million, and then it started to feel good. But how did you get the 30 or 40 million? Because I think that's clearly the difficult step.
So yeah, we did have a real, I'd say, a stroke of luck. What I said earlier about I had a few customers when I worked for the big corporates that said, if ever you start your own, we'll come with you. But you tend to take that stuff with a pinch of salt. But literally, I had the day I was kind of starting my garden leave, one of my old customers called me and said, I said, look, I've left. And he's like, what? And I said, I'm doing this and I'm starting this business with these guys. And he's like, tell me more about that. And he said, come down and have a coffee. So I went down and met him. And he was the chairman of a big FTSE listed business that had probably a $4 or $5 million freight spend, as well as he had his own warehouse in the UK that he was running. He was in the airline business. So he provided all of the airline amenities to British Airways, Virgin, American Airlines, and he was like a really big guy in that world. And me and Mark drove down to his beautiful house in Hampshire, and he said, "Yeah, I'll give you all the work. I'll give you everything." And we're like, "Really?" And he was like, "Yeah, I said I'd give you the work if you started on your own. We'll give you all the work." So we were about 18 months in. And then we land this $4 or $5 million piece of work. And sure enough, he was good to his word. Everything, shut down his own warehouse, moved it in with us. We got a new warehouse at Heathrow that was a brand new build, 40,000 square foot, like beautiful building that literally the builders had just left. We walk into this, we've got this from this absolute crap hole that we were in under the runway in Colnbrook, and it was transformational. Because as soon as customers, what we used to do was not bring customers to the office because the office was a shocker. So then we went to, let's bring them to the office and show them what we've got. And then we had all his business there that pretty much filled 70% of the warehouse from the off. And that was that's a lucky punch. I don't know if it's luck or if it's, you make your own luck or whatever, but and John, God love him, was amazing, true to his word, and was with us for most of our journey until they sold their company and that all ended. But they were a fantastic company.
Also a brave decision for him too.
Massively brave, but I think it's like, we're pretty, me and Mark are pretty convincing, but I don't think he needed massive convincing because he never liked dealing with the global logistics companies because, I'm not saying the global logistics companies are obviously really good at a lot of things, but looking after the guy that's got $3-4 million worth of work that's complex, maybe not so.
Yeah. So you mentioned tech was quite important, revolutionary for the business.
Yeah.
Just as a starting point to understand that a bit more, maybe just list or something, the tech stack, and we'll go from there. So what was internally developed and what was the key parts of that versus what you bought?
Yeah, so the core freight forwarding technology, we never actually developed ourselves. We bought in. So we started off, the US had their own systems, the UK had their own systems, and it's kind of gnarly, but that's kind of how you do it. And then I think in 2007 or maybe 2008, we all went on to CargoWise globally. So we're pretty early adopters of what's now kind of the leading platform for global freight forwarders. So that helped a lot that every office around the world is on the same platform, but we took that decision early. But where we focused, and Mark's passion was on the tech side. So we had in-house tech development that built our own platform that was mainly based around added value. So we used to say if it was in the middle of the supply chain, port to port, airport to airport, that was CargoWise. But if it was anything cleverer than that, if it was PO management, visibility, This is before e-commerce, obviously. This is nearly before the internet. But if it was any of that stuff, that was where we focused, and that was where we gave most of our customers good visibility of product, literally from X factory through to the back door of their DC. And then we built our own WMS that kind of was very early adopting, but it was mainly for B2B, because when we built that, e-com didn't really exist. And how we got into e-commerce, which I'm sure we'll tackle, was definitely more by luck than judgment. It was just more about customers pushing and saying, we're going to be doing an e-com website, and we're like, oh, what? And then that's kind of how it started. But we got into e-com so early. That's what gave Seco such a big rush in terms of being seen as the forerunner in that industry.
So this is, at this point, when you're launching the technology, it's also across geographies already at this point. You're already in Hong Kong and China.
Yeah, Hong Kong, China,
well.
Europe, obviously the US.
Yeah.
We'd then started going into Australia, but it was still predominantly Asia, Europe, and the US were the big markets.
And how do you go about building a Seco culture across those geographies?
That's tough. It's tough because obviously the US company already existed as a US domestic business. We built our own culture in the UK and Europe, which was very easy to replicate in, say, the Netherlands. Then I think we did the Nordics with a core team. So the Netherlands, Nordics, UK, the people we'd brought in to run those and to build those companies were all like-minded people. So we were seen, the UK was definitely seen as the sort of de facto head office of global operations. So we kind of had a bit of a playbook that we deployed to those markets, and we would travel a lot. I mean, the travel that me, Mark, and Keith did in the early days of connecting the dots was insane. I mean, it was 2 weeks a month, long haul, sometimes more. Usually, the States, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Singapore, but mainly just Hong Kong, Shanghai, South China, Chicago, New York, LA, just backwards and forwards.
Hollywood lifestyle.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, if it's like those, when you're sitting down the back, that's no fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was that was it, and that's how you start to. And it's that culture thing is done through recruitment of people that are like-minded, and that's more important probably than anything, because if they're different, or if they're and if they're not on board with what you're trying to build out and the strategy you're building out, it's pretty tough.
So that's maybe the first 10 years or the first half of the Seco story. Within that, were there any key, let's say, disaster moments or key learning points, turning points that you'd pick out as the one memory from the first half of that experience?
I think that there was a couple of things. We had a really big retailer that we were doing some work for, big name, definitely couldn't say their name, but they were a really big retailer. We'd done some niche work for them in some really difficult markets, some air freight, and they really, really wanted us to do more. And they offered us a lot of volume and a lot of business when we were kind of a smallish company, and we declined. And being the guy that was in charge of all the customer acquisition and sales, I was, as you can imagine, not the one that wanted to decline. But the other guy's arguments were solid, that this retailer would definitely, eat us up and spit us out. We'd build our company and our culture around them, and then in 12 months' time, they'd move on to the next shiny thing, and we'd be left holding the baby. Yeah. And it was a good decision. It was a really good decision. Didn't feel like it at the time, but that was a big one. Saying no to that and learning the business that is good to say. Saying no can be quite therapeutic. It's harder to do that in the earlier days because you just hoover up any business you can get in the first few years of starting a business. But you start to finesse your story. You start to finesse what you're good at. You start to look at replicating. Okay, we built that for that customer. We can actually repurpose that and give it to these guys and learn from what we did. So that was a big one. And then I think the second one was when the 08-09 financial crisis came along. We had to, for the first time since we started, so it was 4 or 5 years in, we had to let some people go. Not many. I can still remember the number. It was 7. But that was literally, we were 70 people. It was like 10% of the workforce kind of thing. And that sent a big ripple through us as a sort of leadership group, because we never had to do that before. And also we really had a nice culture at the company, and everything had been growth. So that was quite leveling. But you know, we made sure that everyone was kind of as best as we could sort it out. But obviously you go into survival mode, and when it happened really quickly. 1 minute we're looking at the numbers and we go, you know, we might, because all the big guys were laying off people left, right and centre, and we kind of thought we were staying under the radar. And then literally overnight, like, the numbers just died. And so we're like, we've got to do something. And we did, and we only did it once, and then it carried on and we never looked back. But it was still pretty rubbish at the time, obviously for them and for us, you know. Yeah, they're probably the big ones, I think.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so if we move on to the second half of life in Seco, you ended up selling the business maybe 18 months ago, 2 years ago. So in the second half, how did you grow from 70 people, 5 or 6, 7 geographies, to the position?
So what happened was we sold. So as we grew the company from the US with Bill and Steve, and then, you know, the UK and Holland and Germany and Asia, we underneath it all, we had a very gnarly equity structure where, you know, the 4 of us owned the UK company exclusively, and then we had shares and ownership in Hong Kong and in Shanghai and in all the other entities, and Bill and Steve had equity in this and that, and it was really gnarly. And in about 2014, we had an approach. We'd had a few approaches to buy the company, just to buy the UK company. But we'd had an approach to buy the UK company. And Bill and Steve had an approach, I think, for somebody to buy the US company. And we were like, hold on a minute, we should just put this together. So we did, but that took a year of financial engineering and buying things out and buying people out, and so that we became a proper corporation and one company. So that finished in 2014, and then we sold 51% in 2015 to a private equity company in New York called Greenbrier, who were a fabulous company, and they bought 51%, and the remaining shareholders had 49%. And that was really the beginning of the massive elevation of growth, because obviously they provided us with capital and they provided us with confidence to really sort of put our foot down and do more of what we were doing, but being a bit more, I guess, bold in terms of going for bigger customers. By now our tech had matured. The size of customers we were going after had matured. Instead of going for customers that were doing 300 grand a year, we were going after customers that did 3 million a year and stuff like that. That had all happened in those predecessing years. And then knowing that, you know, they owned a big chunk of the company gives you the confidence. And that was kind of how that started. And then we started doing a lot more of these, opening these offices, building teams around people, and doing that thing and trying to keep the culture the same. But as you get bigger, so I think when we sold first time around in 2015, we'd got to we were about 500 million in revenue globally. So look, when you compare that to the new DSV or the DHL supply chains, you know, they do that in a week. But, you know, we'd grown this from pretty much 0 to about 500 million in about 10 years. But then literally from 2015 on, obviously pre-COVID, which has made, you know, all bets are off revenue-wise when COVID happened. But we just continued to grow and did really well, but tried to stick to the knitting of just being really good, great tech, wrapping our arms around the customer with great account management, great service, and then that's what you try to do. But as you get bigger and you bring in more people and more leadership, and then it starts to get harder. That's the skill, is keeping that together.
So it was around 500 million in 2015, is that right? And then just before COVID, then sort of 2019, 20, where had revenue got to?
I think it was about probably was about 700 million globally, and then obviously when COVID hit, we that first week of lockdown and everything happening and everything, we sat in our boardroom in the UK with the guys in the States, and we're like, they're on on conference call, and we're all like, okay, this could be a problem. Like, because nobody knew, right? Yeah. Nobody knew what was going to happen. And then within a couple of weeks, all of a sudden it started going crazy in a good way. And we're like, oh, hello. This is really starting to uplift. And then it just went absolute nuts for us across. And obviously we'd already then made the transition into e-commerce then with fulfillment, with cross-border parcels.
As part of COVID, because of COVID, or you'd already started?
No, we'd already started. We'd got into e-com early doors, into fulfillment very early doors. Probably we opened our first warehouse in 2011, so it was really early. And then we bought an e-com parcel platform, some guys in Australia that we'd been working with for years as partners. We bought their company, which allowed us to do global air freight at the parcel level, which is not easy to do. You need the tech to do it. And these days, so many companies do it. But back in those days, we were really early pioneers. So that allowed us. And obviously, because we had our air freight was B2B and B2C, and then we had sea freight and road freight, and then we had fulfillment. We just, this business was just coming at us, just landing in our laps. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. Yeah. It was nuts. But it was. But it was great. But obviously I think we always said it was, but we'd much rather it never have happened. Yeah. Because of being because it was rubbish for the world and it set us back years. But for us, it kept the business surviving and we were able to grow.
Yeah. So you sold 51% of the UK and
global.
Oh, global business.
Yeah, global. Yeah.
How did you keep motivated, still being employed by the business, being a shareholder whilst having a nice payout in your bank? How does that work?
I think it was still our baby, and obviously 51%, 49%, still a big chunk that we all still collectively owned at the company, and I don't think it changed. I don't think that changed us at all in terms of what we wanted to do. It certainly made things harder to navigate sometimes because, the company, a new CEO who came in, who was actually running Asia first and then came in to be CEO, and different people came in and it just changed the dynamic as you'd kind of expect it to do. But for the first few years, leading up to COVID, not massively. Everyone was on a mission and everyone was on it and it was fabulous. Then COVID hit and then obviously the business went through the roof. But at the same time, a lot of the stuff that we'd built, the sort of the platform of culture and stuff started to get diluted because you're bringing in loads more people. You're not meeting face to face. You're doing all this stuff on Teams and Google Meets and all this stuff, which is great, but not all the time. And all the stuff that your cultural stuff is built from face to face. It's built from human relationships, not looking at someone on a screen. That's how business is, I think.
Yeah. And did you have one of those moments where you'd realise that it was moving from a sort of not a family business, but a small business of people who knew each other like family, let's say? Now it's a corporate entity. Was it?
I don't think there was one moment with that. I think you felt it over. I think you felt the start of it before COVID because everything was getting bigger, deals were getting bigger, customer wins were getting bigger, customer losses were getting bigger, right? So it cuts both ways. And we just kept our head down, particularly in the UK and Europe, and focused on our customers and made sure that they were happy. but it gets harder as the company gets bigger. Is the truth, and that's the bit that. But there was no one moment. There were several, I think, where we looked at it and were like, okay, this isn't how it used to be. But then you can't, you kind of kick yourself because you don't want to be the people that go, oh, it never used to be like that, because you got to look forward and new things are good.
Yeah. And then how did you and the team respond or feel when the PE money came in? Because they're now majority shareholders. You can't make the decisions as your group anymore. It's a more traditional.
Not really. They were very the first guys, Greenbrier, that came in were very reasonably hands off because we were doing all right. So I think that seems to be the message, that when you have big investors come in, as long as you're doing okay, they kind of leave you alone, and they definitely did. So we were making all the decisions, but it wasn't necessarily us as a core group now, because the US was a lot bigger. The CEO was based in the States. There was a lot more decisions being made there than there were here. But we always knew that was going to happen. That was no surprise. And then COVID obviously just kind of put this massive mask on everything that made everything a bit fantasy in terms of revenue and margin, and that was always going to fall over. That was always going to come back and change and go back to how it was. But before it went back to how it was probably going to go really bad, which is exactly what happened with the market. The market literally just went backwards, and then it's gradually come back.
Yeah. So then the last few months, the last year or so, how was the process in terms of deciding to finally sell the whole shebang?
Yeah, it happened a lot quicker the second time round. All the decisions seemed to be made really quickly on the back of COVID. I don't think we were necessarily thinking of doing it. And again, where that's different is that those decisions and interactions, we weren't at the coalface with those like we were first time round, because it was a much bigger organisation. Of course, we were involved, but not to that level. And the deal got done for literally 100% of the company, and it was probably, I don't know, like 8 to 10 weeks from start to finish, which is nothing. Yeah. And then that was it. And then we were all done. But I stayed. They asked me to stay for a year and just over a year because I was running the global e-commerce business, which was the fulfillment and the cross-border parcel business, which, was good. It's the bit I really loved, the fulfillment piece. I'd gone from being a proper air freight forwarder to being a fulfillment guy, which is a bit of a weird dynamic really, but I kind of enjoyed it. And running the e-com business, had a really dynamic global team in the e-com business, both in fulfillment and in parcels. So I said, well, I'll stay for a year just to make sure the transition was good. And then that was it. And then, over nearly 2 years ago now, more than 2 years ago, and that was it. But boots hung up and, job done.
So looking back now, 20 years in C.
It was 20 years from
when
we started to when we finally exited. Yeah.
So you started with 0. You finished with pushing $1 billion revenue.
Yeah, pushing 2 billion.
2 billion.
Yeah.
Okay. 2 billion.
Yeah.
What would be your key messages for anybody else who's starting that journey or thinking about jumping in with their mortgage payment to start their own business?
Don't do it. Look, I think this industry, the freight forwarding industry, logistics industry, is one, I think that I think it's a brilliant industry. It's one that I fell into. I don't think anyone gets out of bed or goes out of university and says, I want to be a freight forwarder. If they do, there's something wrong with them. And I fell into it like all of us did. But I think that it's given me the opportunity to, I've travelled so much. There's so many countries I've been to, so many countries I don't want to go to, but, I've just had such a great experience. I'd say to people, this is an industry where you can do it. If you've got a team, because it's all about the people, and you've got some customers, but it's different now. Everything has moved on so fast, particularly in the last 5, 6, 7 years, and even in the last 2 years, the speed of change with tech, with everything has just moved on So you couldn't do it how you used to do it. No way. I don't think, unless you come fully armed with a big war chest of money and people that are backing you that have got endless patience. Because, a lot of companies, they get funded, they get VC money or they get PE money and they've never made a profit. We didn't build our business like that. We made profit. I'm sure Keith or Mark will correct me, but I think we made profit pretty much from like month 9 or 10 of year 1 and never not made a profit.
Yeah.
And I think that's how you build a business, not like just borrowing money and saying, I've got revenue, but I'll get profit. I don't think that's the right way to build it, especially in our industry. Our industry is tough for that. You need to make profit.
And how do you see the industry at the moment? Because I'm quite conflicted on it at the moment. I see lots of small startups, lots of tech platforms, lots of small interactions taking place, but also huge consolidation from the big players.
Yeah.
So how do you see the logistics industry moving in the next 2 to 5 years?
I think it's like more interesting and more fascinating now than it was when we started, because the industry is still uber disruptable, like particularly air freight, sea freight, customs. And there's a lot of companies coming in now, VC backed, PE backed, doing all sorts of stuff with AI and machine learning and stuff. But to your point, they're tackling bits, they're tackling elements of the supply chain, they're tackling the easily disruptable elements. But logistics and freight forwarding has so many elements in it that are repetitive and are, Excel spreadsheets, and people run their supply chains on Excel spreadsheets. It's still the case as it was 30 years ago. Carbon dating myself, but there's elements of it that haven't changed much, which is why I love the industry, because it's like, if you really want to disrupt it, then you can. There's industries like global payments and global banking and stuff like that are so far advanced in terms of tech deployment and all the AI stuff that if you wanted to come in and disrupt those industries, that'd be tough. But this industry, there's still a lot to disrupt. Yep. Still a lot in all facets of it.
So maybe that leads us into the next section. So what does life after Seco look like? What's in it for David?
So back in the Seco days, we had a vehicle, me, Mark, Keith, and another guy called Dave Perry, who was our ops director from early doors, who came with me from Eagle. We had a vehicle where we did a little bit of investment in startups and stuff. It was a little side hustle within Seco, which we did, which we loved. And we had a couple of dabbles at stuff, and a couple of them were, terrible. But one of them was a really good thing. It was a company called dutycalculator.com, which was the first landed cost calculator in basket back in the day, early days of e-com. And one of our guys came to us with an idea and said, "I got this idea," and we backed him, and we ended up selling that for like 21 times return in 2016. So that kind of gave us a taste for, because we know the industry, like end to end supply chain, air freight, sea freight, e-commerce, fulfillment. There wasn't many areas we didn't really have a good understanding of in our sphere, but as soon as we went out of our sphere, we were all looking at each other, scratching heads, going, "We don't know if this is a good idea or not."
I mean, 21 multiple sounds incredibly high. Is that normal for the kind of tech things you...
Tech multiple, yeah. It's not, it's 20, and it was 21 times revenue. So it wasn't even 21 because it never made a profit. So it was like, it was definitely speaking our language.
Yeah.
So we were like, "Oh, this is good." And then that became the forerunner for what is now Logistics Labs, which is kind of the same guys pretty much. There was three of them, me, Mark and Keith, and two other guys that were with us at Seco, Dean Townsend and Mark Gross. And we basically did the same thing with multiple businesses. A couple of them that it was our idea, and we basically retrofitted, built out the proof of concept, MVP, and then retrofitted a team to run it. And then a couple of the others were companies coming to us looking for investment that we backed, and we helped them build the businesses out. So I think we've got 6 businesses in labs. A couple of them are really flying, a couple of them are doing okay. One's pre-revenue, one's just done a raise to go to market in September. And they're all, the only commonality with them is that they're all involved in logistics, supply chain and e-commerce, solving very specific problems, generally through tech. And yeah, we enjoy it. But we also do our own things as well. So I've done some other stuff. So I'm a investor and non-exec of a company in Hong Kong called Wayfinder, who are a 4PL e-com fulfillment business based in Hong Kong. Fantastic business, 2 great founders, just helping them with their growth journey. They don't really need a lot of help because they really know what they're doing. And then I'm on the board of a company in the States run by a good friend of mine called Lead Coverage, which does growth marketing strategies for logistics companies and helps basically build outsource pipelines for logistics companies and helps companies grow their inbound and their marketing. But high end is pretty high end. It's pretty enterprise. And we've brought that business to Europe and got some customers across Europe in the last year to just kind of helping them, which is going really, really well. So yeah, they're kind of the main things.
And how do you find businesses to invest in? Because I've been on the other side where I've had due diligence guys sitting all around me and things like that, but I've never been on the side of that first initial contract, trying to find the business looking for investment, how you make that first cut of these look more interesting, these don't. How does that process work?
I think, Mark and Keith are really good at that stuff, but it all goes back to common business knowledge of, is there a product market fit? Are these guys solving a problem that is gonna be in demand, that people are gonna want, or is it something that But then you're reminded of like Uber, and nobody asked for consolidation of taxis, or nobody asked for that. They just did it, and now you couldn't kind of live without it.
And are these companies proactively then looking for investment? And
yeah, some, and then we get the deck, and then we go through it, and then we meet the founders, and so on, and then we don't take on that many, and then some of them, as I said, are our ideas and stuff we've been talking about for years, and then the time's right, and a lot of it is timing. Like one of our businesses in labs, when Brexit happened, it just went through the roof because it gave people a solution that wasn't readily available for trading with the EU, because obviously before Brexit we didn't need to worry about that. So sometimes it's timing. Certainly the stuff that's going on in the States with the tariffs and global trade has been advantageous for a couple of our businesses, because they're trying to help merchants and brands navigate that kind of stuff and those kind of issues. So yeah, and then some of them are people that come to us and say, I've got this idea, and we kind of try to help them and give them, some of our advice, some of our school of hard knocks lessons, and also they want our network, because we know a lot of people because we're old. So the older you are, the more people, the more people you know.
Yeah.
It's like my wife says to me, it's like, so many people. And that's because I'm old. It's like, it's not because I've got a special gift. It's because you get to this age, you end up knowing loads of people. Yeah. But yeah, that's what they want. And it keeps us together. And we've had already some success. And I think we'll have a lot more, because it feels like a lot of it's maturing. We kind of sort of said 26, 27 will be the years that most of these guys take off. And a couple of them are going now.
So if you just, I don't know, maybe look at 2 or 3 of your companies you're investing in, what problem are they trying to solve?
So I'd say probably the one that we're just finishing a raise for now, Zendo is a duty and tax engine. So it's like a routing engine for duties and taxes. Started out in B2C and in e-com, but definitely we're going to roll it out into B2B. So it basically makes sure that the right money gets paid to the right authorities at the right time during the life cycle of the shipment. It's really clever, and it basically takes it from basket. So when the consumer buys it, identifies it, and then routes the money to the right people and pays them automatically. It's very clever. Our partners in that are fintech guys, and they looked at fintech, looked at freight forwarding and e-com payment.
I mean, it's critical for global e-com providers because with the de minimis changes and that happen constantly and things like that.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why it's been really successful, is because these changes now aren't once a year. They are literally 500 times a week. So Zendo keeps up with everything and makes sure that everything gets fired off to the right places and collects the money and makes sure the money gets paid, which is the next logical step. That in our world, in the logistics world, we would never be comfortable with payment or money, but we are, because that's where it's going. So that's one. We've got one that's just launching, which is a returns business, which we've just recruited a CEO for. She only started last Monday, which we're really excited about that business. And we think that's going to be very disruptable in global e-com returns and re-commerce, and not just in returns, but in authentication of high value goods, all of that kind of stuff, which I think we draw on our wider, when you're, I guess when you come, you've grown up in the e-com world, but you have that underlay, if you like, of being, sort of hairy ass freight forwarder, and you know how stuff works in a port or in an airport, and you put those two things together, it means that you've got this kind of undeniably kind of solid view of the whole thing end to end. And I think that's what's allowed us to build these things out, because we're not just guys that know how to move a parcel or an air freight shipment. We know how to get it through customs, how to do importer of record, how to do exporter of record, how to do merchant of record, all of that kind of stuff. So we've just been sort of deploying all of those different knowledge bases into the right businesses.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier that you built South Africa based on the people more than the business idea. You're investing now in various companies. So is that the same approach you take now?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, it all comes down to the people still. I mean, you've got to make sure they've got a good idea and something that people are going to want to buy in logistics. And like I said, the industry still remains really disruptable in so many areas. We're not short of people coming with ideas, because there's so many areas to disrupt, even though there's lots of trailblazers doing great stuff. But I still think it's people. If you get someone that comes and they've got a brilliant idea, but they can't articulate it to us, or they can't articulate it in a deck, how are they going to articulate it to a potential customer or another investor or whatever? So I think it comes down to the people around them and their work ethic, because work ethic is a really big deal, I think, in any business. And that was in our early days of Seco, and now in labs, is that it's a hustle, it's graft. It's not easy, because if it was easy, everyone would be doing it.
Yeah, super. So as we could come towards the end of the podcast now, looking back through your last 20, 25, maybe longer years, if you started all again, would you do anything differently? I don't think, honestly, there's not that many things that I would think about changing. I guess I probably would have gone a bit more all in early doors, as in with financial investment and knowing what I know now, putting probably more in than I did. But it's easy to say that now. But then, when you've got like 2 young kids and a mortgage and all of that kind of stuff, and you're used to the corporate life and the comfort that gives you and the backstop that gives you in the UK and Europe, that they're not getting rid of you anytime soon, no matter how rubbish you are. I think there's not a lot that I would change, other than maybe going a bit more gung ho and probably doing it a bit sooner, rather than wait until I think I was 38 when we started the company, which isn't old, but I think I do what Mark did. Mark had his own business. I think his first company started when he was 21, which is crazy and really early, but it worked for him. And I look at that, I think, I wish I could have done that. But
I'm not a big believer in stuff, coulda, shoulda, woulda. It is, you've done what you've done, and it is what it is,
Yeah. So when you dived in feet first, I'm assuming you were putting many hours in, 7 days a week, kind of stuff. So in those moments, it's also risky for your family and everybody else, and you need that support, I guess. So, what support structure did you have around you at that point from your family, maybe your colleagues as well and friends, and how much did you rely on them to take care of other things that allowed you to focus on what you were doing?
I think that was one of the dynamics, was that when we started, the 4 or 5 of us that were really there early days, the 2 Keiths, Mark, me and Dave Perry, we always said that there was always one of us that was good at something. There was always one of us that had a special skill at something that we needed at that time, which in itself is a support network. So, a guy or girl starts a company and they're on their own and they're doing it all, that's hard, right? Because they got nobody. They got the mirror. They got maybe their partner, if their partner's supportive. They got the dog. They got the cat. They might have some people in the company that they can talk to, but you probably can't talk to those people like you could your business partner or business partners. So I think that was the thing that made me want to do it, was knowing that, Mark had a great track record. Keith was super solid. The other Keith was super solid. Dave I'd worked with before. So we all knew, we didn't all know each other, but within a year, it's like we'd known each other forever. And that's a big difference. And then that helps take the pressure off your home, your partner at home, and your kids. Because when you're traveling, you're never there. You're not, you're coming back. And then when you are there, you're knackered. You're working, doing calls, even before conference calls and video calls, all of that stuff, doing stuff. There's no 9 to 5. It's job to finish. And when the job's finished, you can rest and put your feet up. But on the other side is that if you're not under that kind of pressure, which you weren't all the time, there was no pressure to say, oh, I need to go to the office today, or I need to do this. You look after yourself, and what do they call it now? Self-care. They didn't call it that when we were starting the company. You were a lazy bastard. But now it's self-care. But I'm a big believer in it. I think you need to take, take the rough with the smooth. So I definitely not make any massive changes to how I do it. I just wish that probably the only thing is just wishing that the stuff that's available now with the tech and the automation and the stuff that's come out in the last 3 or 4 years was available then. But, we didn't even have, when we started the company, we had dial-up internet connection. So I can't ask for much more.
Yeah. And you said when you all came together, you all had your unique skills. So what was your superhero skill when you came to the table?
I think that they definitely say I didn't have any of those things if they were in the room. But I think my thing was, I think why it really worked is that Mark bought that entrepreneurial thing. He knew how to start a business, knew how to create a business, a profitable business, not just a business, but a business that made money from pretty much day one. I had that global corporate view because I'd worked for big companies before and he hadn't. So I knew what worked and what didn't, and what we could apply from the global companies that they did really well that would just assimilate nicely into how we would do things and how we did things. So, big companies are really good at managing their relationships with their big global customers. And usually small and medium companies in logistics aren't that good at that. Historically, maybe it's different now, but I made sure that we were really good at that and really good at once we got a customer, that we kept them by just giving them great service and great account management. And then being able to get customers. So that was my main job, was to, tell the story, get the customers, build a pipeline. And you're building pipelines and business against big global companies that, know what they're doing and are slick and have more money than you. So you need to be doing it a bit differently, because if you try to do it like they do, they'll crush you. So we were always good at picking customers that we knew would be a fit, which is probably the one thing that I think is the one big lesson, is try not to be, we weren't trying to be everything to everyone. We knew if we built this solution for this retailer or this cosmetics business, we knew we could take that to the next one and the next one and the next one. And that was really useful. So that was my skill was, and working with Mark on the tech and translating the customer need. I guess these days they call it kind of that product market fit, making sure that we're building something that's relevant and people want. I was pretty good at that because I was always talking to customers and prospects and, probing for, if you had a clean sheet of paper, what would you like? What would you need? And they'd tell me and we could put that into our offering.
Super. Well, thanks very much for your time today. Before we finish, we just wanted to try something new. So a few quick fire questions, if we can throw in your direction, please.
Okey-dokey.
David, so ocean or air?
Air.
Visibility or velocity?
Velocity.
Build or buy?
Build.
Sleepless hustle or 9 to 5?
Definitely sleepless hustle.
One mentor who changed your life?
He changed my life. Blimey. I definitely say I've got. Can I have two?
Yeah. Okay.
Is that right? So I'd say three actually. There you go.
Okay, three is fine as well.
So definitely I learned so much from Mark and Keith. Right. That's so not from a mentor. But Mark and Keith had such skills that I didn't have, I never needed. And then coming into that business, I learned so much. And Mark was so great and strategic at stuff. And Keith was just brilliant at execution and never dropped a ball, never forgot anything. He was like an elephant. And he remembered everything. He always made sure everything got done, which I loved. And that was probably, those two, just learning from them and watching them was an experience in itself, actually, which I really enjoyed. Because in a corporate life, you kind of do your job, right? And you're expected just to do your job and not get involved and not listen or understand what else goes on necessarily in the business. That's how it used to be. Whereas when we had our own business, you had to do a bit of everything. So they always took the piss out of me a bit because I was the big learner. I'd always read everything. I was always reading. I was always downloading stuff because I have this thing that I really want to know it and understand it. Even if I don't need to, I have to really, it's weird. I don't know, it's a very strange trait. So I wanted to learn all the stuff that they were doing and they were very gracious at teaching me. And I guess the other person that was actually probably the person that had a profound impact was one of the original founders of Expeditors when I worked there in the very early days. It was a guy called Kevin Walsh, who was a really lovely man, one of the original 5 or 6 guys that started what's now a $12 billion business. He retired many years ago, but he used to be a frequent visitor to the UK and in Asia when I worked in Asia. And he just always said to me that you never let the IT guys tell you what to do. You never let the tech guys tell you what's possible and what's not possible. The customers tell you that. And I always remember that because he was like, look, their job is to tell you, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. He's like, just never believe them, never just challenge, say no. It's the customer. The customer decides what can and can't be done. And yeah, that was kind of, and he, that was always, because I was a little junior sales rep and he was the founder and he was the CTO, weirdly. He was the tech guy, but he was not like a tech guy. So yeah, him, I think.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that one.
Yeah.
This is quick fire as well.
Okay,
David,
sorry, that wasn't quick
right.
fire, yeah. That was really slow fire.
One book every logistics pro should read.
I would say these days that I would definitely read Cara Brown's book. So obviously I've got a vested interest because I'm on the board of Lead Coverage and she's a good friend, but she has written a book called The Revenue Engine, which is it's an Amazon bestseller. She tells me, I haven't looked, but I got obviously 3 copies. It's a brilliant book about how to grow a logistics company and how to grow a logistics company in 2025, because we didn't grow our business like she talks about, because the tech that they use didn't exist when we were growing Seco. If it had of, we would be 5 times the size that it is now, guaranteed. So that's a brilliant book to read.
Super. So thank you for your time, David. That was really insightful. So thank you for watching Stacked and Loaded. Today we've heard about how you grow a global logistics powerhouse and what to do after you sell it. The messages I took away were focus on people, focus on what you're good at, and don't be afraid to say no. So thank you for watching Stacked and Loaded, and remember, keep on stacking and keep on loading.